Up next, last but by absolutely no means least, Steve, who fell foul of commenting last year that he's never made it to FOTE. No. And I jumped at the opportunity to say, you can come, but only if you speak. So,
yeah.
Over to you.
Is that one mine or is this one mine?
It doesn't matter.
This one doesn't matter. I can use either. Good afternoon. I'm glad to see so many people still here. The resilient ones. The ones who stay to the bitter end. I'll try and make this painless for you. I know you're conferenced out, but does my face go blue when I stand here like that? Holding my breath. Mind the gap. Lots of different gaps that exist when we talk about learning technology, and I just want to try and run a few past you and see what happens. Here's the first one. This is a representation of my dad and my daughter. It's not really them, but you can see it's not. But my dad is, he's 87 now, and a couple of years ago, he went onto Facebook. And you imagine an 87-year-old going onto Facebook, and my daughter, who's 22, you know, he friended her. Imagine that? Imagine her shock and her horror. He friended her on Facebook, and her first status update was, WTF, Granddad's on Facebook. And that's all well and good. And I thought, oh, hang on a sec, you know. And my dad comes back to her and he says, what does WTF stand for? And her eyes started to roll. And you can see her panicking there because he's straight-laced, he's quite religious, and he gets easily offended with you know, bad language. And so I wondered what she was going to say, and I thought, I'll let her be. And I let her be, and after a few minutes she came back and said, welcome to Facebook, Grandad. That's my girl. Problem is, he now uses it with all his friends. You know, WTF, Vicar, you know? But you see, these differentials that happen when people of different generations get together in the same space. And we've got to be, I think we've got to be concerned about that. Not overly worried, but I think we've got to make sure that we're vigilant about it when that kind of thing happens. Another thing, another kind of differential or gap that we have is that the future's here, but it's not evenly distributed. If we're talking about the future and we're talking about technologies, then we have to admit that not everyone has them. And even the people that do have them maybe don't want to use them. And if they want to use them and they have them, they can't use them sometimes. So Gibson's right when he talks about this. There are digital divides out there, and we need to be aware of those too. So that's another one. Here's a third one. I'm going to tell you a story. Some of you may recognize this. This is Macy's in Manhattan. Who's actually been there? Anyone been shopped out in Macy's? Quite a few of you. You know this is what it looks like now. I took that last year. And here's another version of it, back 100 years before. And the story goes that there was a family living in the backwoods. They were hillbillies, let's face it. And they had no electricity, no running water. And they just lived in the middle of nowhere. And they won a prize to go to the Big Apple. And they got on the Greyhound bus in their best clothes, and they went overnight, and they arrived in Times Square, and they got out, and they looked around, and they couldn't believe how high the buildings were. And they couldn't believe how many people were in this city. And she said to her husband, come on, let's go to Macy's. And she dragged him down Broadway with the two kids, and they went and stood inside Macy's and looked around, and they couldn't believe the size of the place. It was huge. And then she did something horrifying. She said to her daughter, come on, let's go off and we'll go to see the ladies' fashions. And she left the poor sap there on his own with his son, and he didn't know what to do next. In New York, in Macy's, in the middle of nowhere, looking around, and he noticed a queue was forming in the corner over there, and he walked over closer to have a look. And he noticed that there was a kind of a doorway that opened up, and people went in. And the door shut, and a number on the top went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the doors opened, and the people had changed. What is this strange machine in the wall that changes people? And he watched it several times doing this. He couldn't understand what kind of magical technology this was that changed people. And then he saw this little old lady walking in with a cane very slowly into this door. And the door shut, and the number went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The door opened, and out walked a statuesque blonde woman, and his eyes came out on stalks. And he turned to his son and he said, son, go and get your mother. You see, the thing is, Arthur C. Clarke nailed this years ago when he said, look, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It really is. It looks magic, and it appears to be magic, and we get overawed by it. And the problem is that we do this a lot in universities and colleges, in schools. We see a brand new technology. James was talking about this earlier on. Other people have said this today. We look at it, we think, we've got to get that because everyone else is going to get it. So let's get it as well. And we get it, and then we think, OK, now we've got it. What are we going to do with it? Obviously, what we should be doing first is looking for problems to solve and then seeing what technologies can solve those problems. Surely that's the best way to do it, isn't it? So, you know, there are all these kind of gaps and differentials going on, and we're aware of them, but what do we do to resolve them? This is how we predict the future. This is Alexander Graham Bell. This is what he said. Read it and weep. One day, every town in America will have a telephone. He was right. You go to America and you see a telephone in every town in America. The problem is with this kind of prediction is that you're actually predicting what you think the future will be using your current mindset, what you know now. And that's the problem we have. We cannot predict the future accurately because we can't see what the new mindsets are going to be. This is the first type of mobile phone. They were huge, these mobile phones. They were so massive. Do you remember the big bricks? They weren't quite like this, but I had a brick once, and I had one of the first mobile phones in my university, and everyone hated me because, you know, I was such a poser with my new mobile phone. But the thing is, what Alexander Graham Bell could not predict was this kind of thing. The idea that we now have chargers in places like Stratty. That's in the shopping centre near the Olympic Park. I took that last year. You'll see them now appearing in places like hotels and in airport lounges as well. I'm sure you've seen them, and maybe you've even used them. You just put your phone in, walk away with the key, and come back 3 hours later, and your phone's all charged up. It's a marvelous idea. But Learning 2000, this was a painting by Vilmar in 1910. This is what he thought that learning would look like in the year 2000. You can see the mistake he's made there, can't you? Obviously, he's looking at it in terms of the paradigm or the model of the time. School's not like that anymore, is it? Well, disruptive technology. I know someone dissed this earlier on. Was it Miles that dissed this idea earlier on? I still think we need to start thinking about disruption. When we stagnate, we need to disrupt. And sometimes the technology does that. This is some predictions from way back. So in 1989, we thought the future would be smart media, and it was. Multimedia. Around about the turn of this century, we thought it would be the web. We could see it happening, and the trends happened, and sure enough, the web became the next big thing. Then in 2009, someone said to me in London, here in London, at Olympia, I was speaking at Learning Technologies, and they said, Steve, what's the future? I said, I think it'll be smart mobile. The future really is in your hands. And I think that's still the case. When multimedia brought the world into the classroom, I think that really smart mobile technologies took the classroom back out into the world again, and that's what we're still seeing now. But I think now, if we're going to be predicting the future now, we're going to have to start looking at pervasive technology. I may be wrong, but I want to just put that on the record. So look at me when I was 8 years old. That's me. That's the last time I wore a tie. I was 8 years old. And I went to my what did you call them? Guidance tutors, I suppose. It was like a kind of a careers guidance advice tutor. And he was the last one that stepped back when they asked for volunteers. You know, he was sat there and he didn't want to be there. And I walked into his room and he said, Wheeler, okay, what do you want to be when you leave school? And I said, I want to be an astronaut, sir. And he looked at me and he blinked and he adjusted his tie and he said, that's not a stupid idea. He said, astronaut, that's not a real job. I said, yes, it is, sir. They get paid. And they go to the moon, and he said, anyway, you can't be an astronaut because you're not American. And I said, actually, there's Russian astronauts, so they're called cosmonauts. He said, don't be a smart ass with me, Wheeler. He said, what are you good at? And I told him what I was good at. He said, well, that's what you'll be then. Next. And that was the end of my careers advice. And the thing was, oh, look at that. That's great. The thing was, I actually ended up being a bit of an astronaut, really. I ended up being an explorer, which is really what I wanted to be. And if he'd listened to me and read between the lines, it would not have been like this. It would have not have been a kind of a car crash situation where I went off and I did nothing for half of my life until I decided I wanted to go back into education and learn. And that's when I started taking my degrees and my teacher training when I was in my 30s. So that was a lost opportunity for many years. We often forget to listen to people. And these are all gaps that will affect the future. School, I mean, that's a great idea. You know, it's a great sign. It's been spelt wrong, obviously, but it's leading the way to education. And our greatest problem with education is ignorance. That's the greatest enemy. That's the dark side, ignorance. Forget all the other stuff that's been. You know, the dark side is ignorance. And Dave Truss here, who's an educator working in China, he says the goal of education is about teaching students, not subjects. There's another gap that we have to avoid. All of this stuff we know about. It's all happening, and it affects us. This is teachers not listening to students or not being clear. You see what's happened here. This is little Hope, and she's called Hope, and she's being asked to name the quadrilaterals. This is Bob, by the way. This is Sam, and there's even one down here called Harry. She's named the quadrilaterals. She got a 0 for that. I think she should have got a 10 for being creative. Here's another one for you. Write the following words in alphabetical order, in the order they come in the alphabet. I think it's brilliant. This guy's a genius. He may only be about 10 years old, but he's a genius. He may be autistic, who knows? But he's interpreted in a way which is logical. And again, he probably got a fat 0 for that. We need to listen to each other. We need to listen to our students, and we need to be explicit with what we want them to do. It's no good being ambiguous, because they will find ways to interpret it differently to the way we intended it. And that's the big problem. Our expectations and their intentions are different often. Tell me, what's the distance between you and me? That shocked you, didn't it? What's the distance between you and me? 8 feet. Can someone else identify another distance? Shout it out. How much? 15 years. Yes, she's a lot older than me. Yeah. Thank you, Lindsay. Go to the top of the class and jump off. What other distances are there between me and her? It could be a gender distance. There could be a language distance. There could be lots of distances that we have. And my thesis is, look, when we're using technology to mediate this conversation between ourselves and our students, often we use the wrong technology, and it amplifies that kind of distance. Whereas what we should be doing is trying to reduce the distance. And so often, these kind of things happen because we're not thinking, or because we're using the wrong technology, or we're using the wrong method. Less said about that, the better. That's my students when I tell them about my projects. But they worry because they want to do well. Do we give them the tools to do well? Often we don't. Often we let them go. And we should be supporting them with the tools and allowing them to use those tools themselves. 3 biggest fears of a teacher using technology. How do I make it work? How do I avoid looking like an idiot? And they will know more about this than I do. Here's the differential. When students are asked about their 3 biggest fears, this is what they are. See the difference? Yeah? Flipping the classroom. Who's heard of flipping the classroom? Flipping the classroom is whole old hat, actually. So we've been doing it for years. The difference is when you start flipping the roles. I'll talk to you about that in a second. Flipping the teacher role instead. So when I stand up in front of my new students, I say to them, okay, I know you want to learn from me, but I want to learn from you as well. Let's make a contract now that we're going to learn together as a community. And in fact, I'm going to ask you to teach me, and I'm going to be your awkward student. And you're going to go away, and you're going to research this, and you're going to come back so well versed in it that when you teach me, I'm going to have to ask you hard questions to try and find out how to catch you out. Are you up for the challenge? And they are. And they do it, and they come back, and they learn an incredible amount more than they would have done if I'd stood up in the front and started lecturing them like I'm doing now. So there are ways of using these technologies. I know this is an ambiguous sign. Slow, children. Texting. You read it any way you like, but a lot of mobiles are banned in schools and also in other parts of the world, places like organizations, because people worry about losing control. They worry about privacy, they worry about inappropriate stuff, but they also worry about losing teacher control. And I have to ask, why do teachers want to control that anyway? If students are engaged, they will be using the technology in an appropriate way. And if they're not, then you challenge them. I say to my students, look, if your desktop is open or your laptop's open or your iPad's working while I'm talking, and I come by and I ask you what you're doing, I want you to justify what you're doing. So one of my students this week, I asked him what he was doing on his laptop, and he said, I'm following your slides on Moodle. And I thought, good lad, that's what I want to hear. So they can be responsible, but I think you've got to put them into that frame of mind where they become responsible. What's this? It's the Lord's Prayer. You've got to do it in a voice, forgive our enemies, that kind of, yo, The bit at the end, most excellent dude, yo, I would rap, but rap and crap kind of go together with me. But the thing is, yeah, it's the Lord's Prayer in 160 characters or less, an SMS text. And I think that's really creative. Kids can be really creative with these technologies if you let them, give them the opportunity. And there's often this kind of problem about, oh, well, they might be writing like that in their essays. Actually, I think most students know the difference between writing an essay and writing an SMS text. So I think we've got to be interested in how they use these technologies. And I don't know if you can see that very well, but students now take notes like that, don't they? Who does that resonate with? Who's seen that happening in their classroom? A forest of hands, yeah. That's what we see going on there, because they know how to do it. And new learners, whatever we think of them, John Waters did some work on this, and this is the one I really want to look at here. They're more oriented towards being their own modes of production. This is the paradigm shift that we've seen in the last 10 years or so with students using new technologies. But they need so much more, and I'm just going to go through the few of the things they need more of. I show my students this, and I say, what's wrong with it? And they go, ooh. And one student, I kid you not, one student last term, she said, is it 70%? The thing is, they need digital wisdom. They need, what does Howard Rheingold calls it, the BS detector. They need to learn BS detection. They need to know that, all right, they can quote from Wikipedia, but it's better if they go in and edit it themselves and then show me the project they've done working with Wikipedia to make a new page. That's much better than quoting from something someone else has done. That's much more creative. It's much more about inquiring and about critical thinking. This one here. I've got a quote from Abraham Lincoln. That's not a real photograph, by the way. In them days, they didn't actually have iPhones. It was I just want to point that out to you. But the point is, it's all about digital reputation as well. Students need to be able to manage their digital reputation these days. And otherwise, it comes back and bites them. They need new literacies, what we're all calling now digital literacies. Transliteracy, by the way, that's an interesting one. That's the ability to present yourself equally well on all the platforms you use. This is stuff that we never had to learn at school. This is incredibly different stuff that we never got taught. And we've had to pick it up. But we have the chance to actually embed this kind of thing into all learning curriculum now. Digital literacies are not just skills, and they're not competencies either. They go beyond that. They go into the idea of the literacy and then maybe even the mastery. I learned to drive in England, and I learned to drive on the left-hand side of the road, on the right-hand side of the car, mirror signal maneuver, the highway code, all that. When I went to America, I had to almost learn it all again. The competencies, the unconsciousness aspect of it, when you drive to work and you forget you've done it, that kind of stuff, it all came to the fore again, and I was on the wrong side of the road, wrong side of the car, the gear shift was wrong side of, everything was different, and in effect, I was in an alien environment. And I put it to you that the majority of us in this room are actually, when we venture online, we are in an alien environment. Who knew, for instance, that writing in capital letters was shouting? We all had to find it out somehow, didn't we? It's an unwritten rule. There are loads of unwritten rules like that when you're online. It's an alien environment. We have to rethink a lot of the literacies that we've already got inside our heads. This, to me, is my kind of representation of the future topology of education with the technologies all in place. So infrastructure, interface, tools, down to interaction. These are the 4 features that I think are going to become more prominent. We're already seeing these actually in place, but they will evolve. And I'm going to show you another little map here, which I derived from the work of Novus Vivek, and there's several of us working on this at the moment. I just want to finish with this. Can you imagine, down the bottom here, you've got degrees of social connectivity, and on the left-hand side, you've got degrees of information connectivity, and the trajectory we want to go in is kind of like that. We want richness in both of those areas. If you look at the original web, when it first emerged in the 90s, or we can call it Web 1 or whatever you want, but the sticky web, there wasn't a lot we could do with that. It was a push technology, and we had to just basically accept what was pushed by the webmasters. And then Web 2 approaches came in, the kind of the social web or the participatory web, the read-write web, whatever you want to call it. And that became much more social, but it wasn't really that much more higher up the scale in terms of information richness. This is why we're now talking about the semantic web, Web 3.0, and even Web X.0, the meta web, the web of webs. We're starting to call this all sorts of things, but I think the general consensus now is that we start calling it the smart extended web. And then you can see how it all evolves. Whereas Web 1 connected information and Web 3 is knowledge, Web 2 is people. Web X is going to connect intelligence. It's going to connect a whole range of things together. It's about machine and human working together. We've got kind of signs of this going on already. So, for instance, if you go onto Amazon and you buy a book, it says, oh, did you know that 26 people who bought this book also bought that book? And you go, ooh, I didn't know that book. I want it now. And suddenly you want that book. It's new knowledge that you never even knew you wanted. It's great marketing, but think how these kind of systems can be embedded into learning technologies. Think how it could make it so much easier for our students to find content and create content, share it, repurpose it, amplify it, and all the other things that they're doing with content these days. A few more slides for you to think about. I won't bore you with this. I'll share this through Frank later on. This is something else I'm working on at the moment. I blogged about this recently. Constructs. In the old paradigm, content was king. We're now looking at context being king, but I think we're going towards a point where the community is going to become the curriculum. And there are all sorts of other moves that we're seeing happening with the new technologies being embedded into our everyday experiences. So to finish with, a quote from Socrates. What? Oh, damn it. Sorry, excuse me. This is embarrassing. I asked my son to find me a picture of Socrates. What am I going to do? Excuse me, one moment. I'll find a picture of Socrates. Anyway, no, it wasn't Socrates. It was Plato that said this, right? It was Plato that said it. So I'll find a picture of Plato. Damn it, that's Socrates. Wait a minute. I'll get it right in a minute. There we are. We got it. Hooray! Round of applause. What you've just witnessed is the evolution of the web, the survival of the fittest content, or Darwinianism. This, I think, is going to be equally important. It's going to narrow the gap between our expectations and our imagination and reality. I think what it's going to do is it's going to give each of us an insight into how knowledge is created, how knowledge is shared. The nature of knowledge itself is coming to the fore now. That, for me, is the future of education. Thank you.